Peter, holy cow.
All right, this is going live. It's going live.
Oh, no.
Are
Okay.
you guys prepared?
All right. Well, I got to get my undead costume ready then, I think.
Get your undead costume ready.
Yes. Welcome.
All right, this is
Welcome to our podcast.
yes.
We are the children of the night.
That's right. Children of the Night philosophy.
Listen to us sing.
Of the 7 p.m. dinner times.
People that just logged in are really confused at this point.
It's philosophy. They should be confused.
They should be confused.
Yeah.
What is this?
I know
Who are
I
we?
am.
Good.
What is this? Who are
What
we?
is what?
What is life? What is philosophy?
So how many people are watching us?
Like probably nobody. we just went live. I don't know.
You know how
That's
many
my best
people
guess.
watch Freddie
That's my best
Mercury
guess.
in the Live Aid broadcast? Well, probably fewer than that. But
Probably nobody, but some people watch us, like I got messages from people. I still have to get back to Vladimir from Russia, but apparently people are watching us in Russia.
oh my God.
And we can't tell. So it could be literally anyone.
Anyone.
Yep.
So do you have any indication there of how many people?
I don't think it's that many, man. I
think you have to wait
I know
until
that
it's
some
over.
people watch us. I think it's very few people. Some of them in Russia. I don't know.
I don't know. Are they trying to influence our vote?
I don't know. If they are, I mean, at least they're still watching us.
Hey guys, you're a little late. Don't tell.
Well, David was
Time is
watching us
relative.
because he joined us.
Indeed.
Actually, this guy from Russia, he might join us at some point. He has a philosophy club in Russia.
Ah, good.
He really likes our meetings.
I know. I invited my friend Dave, so we'll see if he shows up.
All right, if he shows up, he'll be welcomed.
Unless he's Russian.
If he's Russian, he'll also.
Or unless he's Frank. Hi, Frank.
Howdy. Good to
Yeah,
see y'all.
Frank
I
is
know
not welcome.
he's Jewish. He might be working
outta
on a
here.
space laser.
Oh, okay. Bye.
No, don't go.
Oh, okay.
Oh, the space lasers. Ooh, yeah. Now we're talking.
Pew pew.
Frank is Captain America. He's here to
Yes.
to stand for what is good and holy.
Mhm.
Although, if he turns around the other direction, you find out he's really the Red Skull. So it's kind of a interesting juxtaposition. there.
The hell did I walk into?
I don't know, man. This is really weird today. We're all kind
Friday night.
people
Mike, I've
probably
been
think
here and
we're
I
drunk.
This
still
might
don't know
be,
what you walked into.
COVID vaccination symptom.
This is
There
the
you go.
COVID
Okay.
vaccination
Okay.
post COVID vaccination podcast.
Oh, okay.
Yes, little did they know that Bill Gates has put in mind control things into the COVID vaccination.
People are gonna start like
Nano
talking
robots?
funny from now on, like saying like strange things.
We're gonna
Like
talk
people have been
funny.
doing for the last few years already.
Can
Well,
we
that's-
talk funny? I like talking funny.
That's true.
no.
I already talk funny, so no one will notice.
Okay.
Bill Gates, isn't Bill Gates like according to a lot of the QAnon people, is he not like the leader of the whole thing?
I think that's George Soros.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
George Soros. Bill Gates is like the leader of the lizard people, right?
I don't know. Does he have a pizza shop in New York where they have pedophiles?
I don't know, man.
Yeah.
If it's gossip, I don't know it. So
I'm pretty sure he's
Yeah.
like the
You're
leader of
much better
lizard
off
people.
for that. as
leader of the
well.
lizard people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your truth is my truth.
I have always wanted to say I am the Lizard King, so
Are you? Not Bill Gates?
I would like to be.
I am the
Is there something about
eggplant. You are
lizard
the
people that I don't
eggplant,
know?
we
Like,
are
what
the
is this?
walrus.
Is this a real thing?
In the internet, there's all sorts of things that you never really know.
Sure,
what they mean.
in the internet, but like
Yeah.
Lizard people is one of them, I think.
that's a real thing.
That's a real
Where
internet.
they like flay their tongues or splay. What is it?
I'm not sure. I think there's something about that people believe that there's some lizard
Frank,
people that live among
Frank,
them.
you make the best faces.
Wow.
I have to walk like this.
You guys must have heard that 5G causes COVID, right?
Oh yeah.
No,
Oh, yeah.
really?
Yeah, that's
You never
old
heard that
news.
one?
That's old news.
No. That's an old
It's- God damn, this is why I drink, you guys.
one.
The
There was also
reptilian
5G caused
conspiracy
Brexit.
theory. Here we go.
Brexit? How did it do that?
No, that was Cambridge Analytica.
Oh, they were blaming on 5G too for a while.
What? How? I want another connection.
TK is going to join as well.
Brexit happened about the same time they started getting 5G in
There's
the UK.
a
Howdy do.
subliminal signal embedded in the 5G signal.
Hmm.
What's
There
been
we go. The
5G?
reptilian conspiracy theory, and amongst others, they blame Robert E. Howard and H.P. Lovecraft for it.
Oh,
right?
you
So
motherfuckers.
Yeah.
I mean, look, correlation is always causation. I mean,
Okay. If it was Lovecraft, it would not be reptilian. It'd be fish people. Read the shadow over Innsmouth. Don't
Or
you
mushroom people.
goddamn Philistines.
Exactly.
So what's the lizard people conspiracy after all? That's a real thing, right? Did you find
I
out?
just copied the thing from Wikipedia, the reptilian conspiracy theory.
Oh,
Yes,
you
it's a
actually
real
linked to it.
thing.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Okay, give us a summary, just like fast summary.
A bunch of crazy ass people believe a bunch of crazy ass things about reptiles
And people.
and people. And
And it
Great
goes back to a-
Zimbabwe and the
it goes back
Mokele
to a
Mbembe,
series in the
you
80s
name it, they
called
got it
Business
all.
My niece is
for Bees.
calling me. I have to go, but I'll be
Okay.
back. I'm interested in this conversation.
All right, TK, when you come back, I'm hoping we won't be talking about lizard people anymore, but
Right. I don't think so.
maybe. I don't know. You never know.
They even connect it to the Bush family and the British royal family, man. I mean, anything and everything you could
But just-
possibly drag into
that's-
this. It's-
I
they
don't know.
drag
What if
into
the
it.
lizard people get TK?
I don't want to live on this planet anymore.
Maybe
Maybe that's why he left. They've already gotten to him.
Look, maybe
Yes, he's
it's
going
the
to
lizard
report to his
people.
lizard people master.
Maybe it's the lizard people calling TK.
And I don't see a mention of Dr. Kurt Connors anywhere in this, and that amazes me. And probably there are 2 or 3 of you who know what that reference is. Bruno's thinking about it.
I'm thinking about it. I'm
Kurt
thinking.
no,
Connors, you read
I-
comic books?
I'm trying to figure out how many people are watching us.
Oh, okay.
I stopped reading
You're
comic
still
books
looking.
about
I don't think you can see
Almost
the number
50 years
until the
ago.
end.
Ah,
I think maybe one person.
and is he really a person or
Always
is he a
anonymous,
reptile
so you
guy?
don't-
You're talking about Spider-Man, right?
I am.
All right. Yeah.
Yes, good on you. I figured you would be one of the ones to get it.
1 point for Frank.
Hey,
You
slide
win.
back into
You win the
at a
interwebs.
point, then I can watch intellectualism just die.
Mhm.
There's,
But you get a point. You get to keep that. That's yours.
there's
Forever.
24 subscribers. I'm hoping to reach like 200. After 200, we'll start getting like people to watch us.
Then you can get on that list of famous philosophy podcasts. That would be cool.
Exactly.
They could push agendas.
I want to get
Just
into
so I
that.
understand, Bruno, what are the
Oh.
first 199? They're not people?
Right?
No, I mean,
Reptiles.
They
like,
don't. There's zero
people
until you
actually send people to us, instead of like by accident, someone like comes across it,
And are they lizards? Do you know for sure?
Like, I'm surprised, David, that you were able to come across it. I mean, that's like some crazy chance.
Come across what?
Like the podcast, because we're so small.
Oh, no. I just looked for philosophy on YouTube and I found you guys.
Wow.
But I didn't first observe a live stream. I found a recording. So
Oh.
Yeah, Bruno, what you got to do is find philosophy forums where they're discussing the topics that we're mentioning and put a link to it on the forum, and then you'll get a lot of viewers.
Yeah.
That's what I did with my
That
YouTube
is-
channel.
Bam,
All right,
spam,
Michael is
spam.
now the chief of marketing.
Plug.
Chief of
Plug
social media.
away.
and what's your YouTube channel called, Michael?
The name of it's actually just Michael Greenberg, but it's a YouTube channel about math, advanced math.
Oh,
It has
okay.
like 540 something subscribers so far.
Wow.
Oh,
Wow.
That's
Oh,
kick-ass.
cool.
So it's like how How many? You do the math, Michael, because you're the math. That's what, 25 times bigger. This podcast, we have 25, something like that. I don't know.
But yeah, if you put it on forums, like just find philosophy forums and put a link to this, and then yeah, it'll grow.
That's brilliant. That's
It's
that's-
not that. I mean,
So what are some of the YouTube channels that you enjoy regularly, Michael? Stand
I
up.
like the Joe Rogan podcast. I know I've kind of said that 50 million times.
Yeah.
I like random politics channels. But yeah, I won't mention which ones just to avoid any sort of judgment for now. But I just watch it for the entertainment. But yeah, I'm trying to think what else. I like Sean Carroll has a podcast. I don't know if you guys.
Oh yeah, I like Sean Carroll. Yeah.
He has one called Mindscape.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are just some of them.
That's cool, man. I should start watching. I mean, no, I'm not gonna watch your podcast, Michael, because that's way too difficult for me. Advanced math, that's not gonna work. If you do
watch for like 10
about
seconds.
anything else, I'll watch it. But advanced math is just like that's gonna go over my head.
Mhm.
So you're that passionate about math? That's pretty cool.
I am. Yeah, just look at my channel for like 10 seconds and then you'll get a sense.
What's the channel called?
It's just my name, Michael Greenberg. But yeah, I guess I could post a link to it in the chat of this video.
I mean, some people, not me, because I'll subscribe to it, but I won't watch it for more than 10 minutes. But Craig is gonna love it, I'm sure, because Craig is a big, math guy. Like not the bad math, but the mathematics.
Oh, have you gotten Quan to subscribe? He's a big math guy.
Yeah. So you have some subscribers
you are.
here. So I'll subscribe to it, but
Yeah, I
I
got
think
you.
Craig is gonna watch it every day from now on.
I wouldn't
Thanks, Greg.
necessarily say that, but
No, Bruno already promised. You got to do it now.
Look, I just subscribed, man. Subscribe. Boom.
Just
exactly.
subscribe.
You
Let me
went
refresh.
You went from 544 to 546. So 2 people here just subscribed.
Yeah, I did too.
There you
I
go.
see it.
So there you
Thanks.
go. Sure. Always happy to support a colleague.
There you go. And
Yeah.
make sure you
Yeah.
subscribe to this channel, guys, since we're getting
I gotcha.
subscribers here. I'm gonna post a link to actually this conversation right now.
Okay. Well, subscribe to YouTube, Bruno, because
If you haven't subscribed yet. I'm actually thinking about changing the name from the Philosopher to Philosophy Club. I kind of like it better. This channel, guys, since we're getting
subscribe.
I'm hearing myself. Link to actually get a. So, what do you guys
Where-
think? Is
Where
the
else would you go to
philosophy-
hear about the reptilian conspiracy theory? I mean, come on.
Now,
I
I'm
wanna
curious,
hear about it.
does this lizard people theory tie back to the TV series that was on in the 80s called V for Visitors? It was about aliens that disguised themselves as human beings, but they really look like lizards.
I did
Probably.
not see a mention of that in the Wikipedia article, but
Me and
I remember that series though.
It was probably inspired by that. I'm guessing, or some movie. I think there's a couple of movies as well about lizard people.
Or maybe they watched the Gorn episode of Star Trek and it just
Yeah.
never left their minds. I don't know.
Or Superman and the Mole Man, which was actually the first Superman movie ever made. It was like made in the 50s. That was the original superhero movie, and it was a movie about essentially lizard people, but they were mole
There
men.
you go.
Mole man. What's a mole man?
It's a lizard man, but a mole instead of lizard,
Hmm.
something like that.
Yeah, in Dungeons and Dragons we call them
Yeah, isn't that
troglodytes.
obvious?
Did you say troglodyte?
Yep,
Okay.
meaning cave dwellers, right? But in D&D, the cave dwellers are reptilian in nature, and well, there you go.
Kashir, you look like you just walked out of O'Donnell's.
I know.
It does. It was crazy. I actually believed it for one moment this year. Even though I know it's not real, it looked like you're coming out of the pub.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I totally just went. I said I had to get someone delivering some beer.
Bruno, whatever you do, do not watch the series V.
I watched that, but not the old one. I watched the
Oh
new
yeah,
one.
the old one. No, I'm saying you knew that it wasn't real, but you still believed it.
Oh boy, you're right. I'm very gullible, so yeah, I shouldn't watch certain things. All right, so
I
I'm
mean,
gonna send this
the
to
original V is very
see if he'll
80s.
join us. Rupinder. Yeah, that was a great idea though, Michael. Yeah, we're gonna grow this thing. I'm gonna make it like we're gonna be like Joe Rogan, you know?
Yeah, his only started with like 20 viewers or something.
There you go.
You know, I don't know what made me think of this, but I saw a YouTube video once of it was the top 15 or top 20 movie heroines of all time. And not one of the movies was made prior to 1990.
Wow.
Here.
They left out Lieutenant Ripley. Yeah, I think that's
They left out Ellen
They
Ripley
can't leave
and
out Ripley. She's the main one. She's like,
yeah.
how did they leave that one out? That makes no sense.
They is not really with it. It's just a couple of guys sitting in a basement somewhere, deciding what they think.
who are illiterate.
And they
That's a
weren't.
huge fuck
They
up.
didn't
Who
watch
did the list?
movies prior to 1990.
Who did the list?
It was. I don't know who did it. It was just on YouTube.
Oh,
But my
okay.
what tuned me in that it was a contrived list and not, a survey of X number of moviegoers or anything, was that it said the greatest movie heroines of all time. That was the clickbait. And
but the all-time
I don't
started
think
after.
you could say that if you neglect any movie heroine prior to 1990.
Oh, hold on, wait a minute, David. You're saying somebody on the internet gave a very misleading and exaggerated title?
Yeah.
That has never been done before. That has never been done before. I'm pretty sure.
Especially on the internet. I mean, everything you see on the internet.
Well, everything is fact-checked first before it goes on the internet.
Yeah.
Especially, well, whatever. Let's not get too political. All right. Let's, I'm gonna start recording, okay? So.
Who did that?
Well, we went live on YouTube and now I just started recording. I don't know. Anyway.
Oh, right. Got it.
First question I want to propose that we discuss is the democratization of finance good or bad for society? Is the I'm having trouble with that word. Democratization of finance good or bad for society? So this comes in the wake of the whole thing with Robinhood and everything, with people getting into finance and kind of changing the financial landscape and changing the investing landscape. And I just read today that in the last months, they didn't specify how many months, but so definitely less than a year. Before, it was about 50% of people in the United States, adult Americans, had some sort of asset or some sort of investment, and now it's about 80%. So there's been an increase in about 30%, and I'm guessing, this is me speculating. A lot of those people are these people that got in, with apps, millennials, younger people. So, and then we got something like what we got last week with the GME thing and all the stocks that got banned, people losing money, people making money. But in general, so we talked about it last week, but I want to talk more about, just to start today, more of like a general idea of, is it good that so many people are entering this field, or is is it a bad thing? Like what does this represent to society?
I think it's a really valuable stepping stone to help the greater populace become more aware and personally invested in finance and the market and shares and what power in finance means. But I think the way that they are now is still also hugely subject to deep pocket manipulation. I don't think it's even close to flawless. I don't think, it's as fair as it seems like it is. But I think it's really important stepping stone for making it a wider concern for people personally. So
why do you think it's important?
Well, just people pushing back on big money and saying in a different way other than voting that they care how money is used and who influences markets, who influences products, who influences, it basically, beyond just being a consumer, one who is basically farmed through marketing and media, you are able to sort of double your voice. Rather than just buying something, you also participate in their revenue. Whereas, normally all you'd be doing is spending money. You also get to receive a little bit of what you are
or lose it.
Or lose it, yes, obvious, yeah. But you get to say what you personally find valuable and what you think is worth betting on. And I think that is, like I said, an extra power other than just buying product. I think it's really important.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good point. So people are not just passively participating in the economy, right? As consumers, they're also actively participating in the sense that they are part of the means of production. They own a part of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, I think that's a really good point. It evens things out.
I mean,
to some extent, yeah.
Yeah, but a limited way. But I think just the awakening of the general public to participating in the market. I think that's really valuable. Any kind of enlightenment is really important. And I think this is just something that's been kept away from most of the population for, the entire time it's been a thing. So the fact that it's now becoming accessible and people are able to, like I said, invest their own intellect and their own finances and their own risks and all that kind of stuff. The personal investment is a teacher. And I think it's a really great lesson for people to become more engaged with how the market affects everybody while they're watching it, rather than wondering how some of these things come to be and how some people get rich, seeing sort of after it's already happened. It's kind of like watching it happen on TV when you're linked to it, even if it's like $50 or whatever. So
yeah, and on a very similar note, just to complement a little bit what you're saying about people being more active, I like the idea that these young people that didn't really that weren't really involved in these matters, now they start to get an idea about how the economy works and how these companies work, and they start to get a whole different idea about how society is made up. And this also produces more people that are more aware, like you're saying, people that are more aware of society, of they're not just people watching TV, or like watching a commercial in some way, or using their smartphones, but never really understanding how they get to,
how the rich get so rich.
Yeah. How that mechanism works exactly.
Right. Not until you get into the stocks do you really understand how money multiplies once you have it. It's not just about selling the best products. It's not just about having a good idea. It's about putting your money in the right places. And it's just a hard lesson to learn unless you start trying to do it.
And also, people are not when they have direct access to buying companies. They're not detached from finance, like when they have a 401k, right? That it's kind of like in autopilot. I mean, they still participate, but not very, as intensively, as actively, or when they just have a mutual fund, or someone else is taking care of their investments. When they take ownership of what they owe, basically, and what they buy and sell, and how they participate in that. I mean, I think it's important for people to take more ownership of that.
The problem is, though, how much are people learning? I mean, stock price, the health of a company, stock price is one indicator, but it's not really that. I don't see GameStop as what's happened with GameStop. I don't see it as really an educating experience, because it's not really based upon the fundamentals of GameStop, or really.
I think it's educational. Learning that that the masses can actually communicate with each other and cause shifts in, like finding out that that's even a thing, that it's possible. That is huge. Like that is very educational. But also that there are people out there that have the power to shut that kind of thing down. Also educational. It just tells you what is going on in the market, and what the limitations are for the small man, and how much that can suck when you find out, as just an individual with limited means, how limited your power is. That is kind of it kind of stokes a revolutionary fire, I think.
Well, yeah, there's that, but I think that's something a lot of people knew already. I guess maybe you're seeing it firsthand.
You couldn't know it already until you actually participate in that and then see what's happened, because that's never happened before. We never had internet and millions of people dumping into one stock and making it blow up. Like,
I respectfully,
I don't know how we could expect that.
I respectfully disagree with you, Natasha.
Okay.
You can not participate and understand that some of these people were doing nefarious things. If I understood what you said correctly, that if you didn't,
I don't think it was.
I thought that you were saying that if you didn't participate, you wouldn't know that these people were doing.
No, I'm not saying it's not predictable, but I'm saying most of the people don't think about it, and most of the people who participated in it obviously didn't. They learn after the fact, and I think a lot of people need to learn while they're doing things. Most people aren't. I mean, there takes a certain amount of we have been investing for a while, so it's something that I could foresee just by being in investment language and being investment habits for a while. Somebody who is not accustomed to investing and then hears, because it was on NPR, here's an NPR that Robinhood, they go sign up for Robinhood, they dump their money in GameStop. How would they know? That was kind of what I was talking about, is that the general ignorance of people who aren't in the habit of investing, which is particularly likely for younger generations. So
Well, yeah, at the base level, yes, I'd agree with you. You are learning to put your money into a stock and learning to read a stock price, but it's because I don't see it necessarily though as understanding the fundamentals of the financial system, and I think frankly what I see more happening with GameStop is essentially not much different than basically sports betting. It's you're looking at a hot stock and you're trying to ride it.
Right.
And hopefully you get off it
Very
in
much
time.
betting.
But it's, I mean, yeah, of being in the market, I think this is where we need to kind of decide about what people are learning. What is the lesson? Is GameStop this one sense of this revolution idea of the small cap investor taking on the big cap investor? There's that, but we've had bubbles before. I mean, this was the first social media driven bubble though.
Well, and that's the point I was really making is the power of social media decision making. And we're starting to, with the Trump administration as well, we're starting to see how far people are willing to take it. We've had social media for a while and people have certainly tried to do a lot of things, but it sounds like a lot more people are starting to be up for mass organizations. And that's what I was talking about with the revolutionary spirit. I think people are interested in creating a momentum and even if just any momentum.
I do think this was a mass organization, but there's a part of me that wonders if it was also a mass manipulation.
That's what I kind of said at the very beginning with my opening thought.
Yeah, like I'd say we learned that we can sway. We learned that giant social media can sway things, but is it a good swaying?
Right.
In my opinion, like I think we also need to be careful. Like, what exactly is nefarious behavior that hedge funds take? They're not just automatically nefarious. What exactly is it they're doing that is nefarious? And I think people often get confused. I actually personally don't think shorting 140% of a stock is nefarious. Now that might sound, it kind of goes against the tide. I don't think that action is nefarious. No. I think other things they do are nefarious.
I'm sorry, go ahead, finish.
Okay. So yeah, I'll point out some of the things I think that they do that are nefarious. Hidden fees, or the insider trading, trying to, release some news article on something that they've already bought. I think there are a few nefarious things, but I don't think shorting 140% of the stock is nefarious, in my opinion.
It depends on your viewpoint, though, because if you're shorting because the stock is out there to raise capital for the company, and GameStop's been trying to reorganize, so if there's a massive short of GameStop stock, they're not going to be able to raise the capital, reorganize. And so if we take the kind of the revolutionary or the kind of plucky story, is that gamers basically saw GameStop being shorted, and this would essentially drive GameStop into bankruptcy and possibly dismantling GameStop. And so then they decided to come and save GameStop by buying up their stock. Now, that's the kind of quote romantic story. I don't know if that's necessarily true, and I think there's a lot of unanswered questions about exactly why GameStop stock shot up that high.
But even if that's true, companies go out of business all the time when they're not able to generate enough profits. Basically, is saving a company a virtue? I say saving a company is only a virtue if that company is inherently more valuable than the alternative investment. That's kind of my view.
This is the quote wisdom of the market question, but the argument goes that it's that yes, there are good reasons to short GameStop. It's that if you're making such an aggressive short, though, at that case you are artificially driving down the value of GameStop. So there's a good argument to say that in that case, you are basically trying to kill off GameStop to make a profit. It's not just
the same thing with AMC as well.
Yes. With any stock, I mean, company X, for whatever reason, somebody decides to take a massive short on company X, chances are they're going to drive down the price of company X. Whether the fundamentals of company X is trying to do some sort of expansion or reorganization critical to their company survival, and they get shorted and they can't raise any more capital through stock sales, that might be the end of company X.
But is getting rid of is taking down GameStop so bad if you can then take your money and reinvest it in something that might be more fruitful?
Well, it depends on if it's coordinated or if it's a personal opinion. Why would you want to convince other people to also short if you're just personally wanting to invest? What does it benefit you if other people invest in the thing that you want to invest in? If anything, you don't want to do that. You want to invest in something that's low, so you move your money quietly. So
But if you want the price to go up, you persuade a lot of people to invest in it.
Sorry, say that again?
If you want the price to go up, you persuade other people to invest in it.
Right, but that doesn't require moving out of one specific company.
Well, I guess you only have a fixed amount of money to invest. So if you're
One person,
not,
so one person has a fixed amount of money to invest, right?
yeah.
But what would be the motivation to convince other people to divest from one specific company?
The argument there would be that the fundamentals aren't good, is that you're just not going to make any money off of GameStop. I mean, that's the reason why GameStop stock was
that
down.
Much about your friends, like in their investment, you're saying, so that's what the hedge fund thing is about, right? Is coordinating a short, right?
Well, no, they're right. They are using market share because
one investor who dumped a whole bunch of stocks.
Yes, and that's happened before in the history of the market. Yes, you do have situations where one wealthy investor who's dumped a bunch of stocks.
Mm-hmm.
The
but
same.
That's not what happened with GameStop, is it? Just one person was like, I don't think GameStop is nearly tanked the whole thing, and therefore all of the population needed to jump in and save it.
No, it wasn't one person. It was a hedge fund.
That's my point.
I don't know exactly the hedge funds that were shorting GameStop, but there were hedge funds that were. But hedge funds are shorting companies all the time. It's not. I don't think there's anything particularly unusual about them trying to go after GameStop. It was a weak company that they were targeting, and there's others. There's like AMC. There's some of the airline stocks that have been shorted.
Well, but it's not a, I mean, well, I want to say two things just real quick. The first thing is that we kind of already like covered some of this stuff like last week. Like I think it's interesting as well. Like if we can discuss about not just the GameStop episode, but also the fact that a substantial part of the population, like the young people, are finally getting into this arena, and if this is really something that is going to bring good change or bad change. Like, for example, I've had someone tell me, well, it's bad that these people are getting into finance because it's just creating a bubble, and prices are getting inflated. So that's one argument. But on the other hand, I mean, these are people that, we're talking about a lot of young people here. This is the new generation. So they have, I think, like, what Natasha was saying before, I think they probably have the right to be not just a consumer, but to actually owe something, like own something, be a part of the economy, not just as a cow that gets, squeezed to give milk, but as part of the people that are producing stuff and are in charge. Because, economic power has become even more powerful than political power in the society. So that's number one. I mean, number two, just in respect to this particular idea of the shorts, I mean, I can see your point, Michael and Sashir. I mean, but on the other hand, like Korea, I think they just outlawed shorting, I think, for the time being. And I mean, there's no... this is a very specific question, but like, what is really the value of letting people use the money to, instead of investing in stuff, to go after companies and tank them? I mean, does this really benefit society? I understand. Look, people want to make money. Look, I want to make money. I'm in the stock market. I'm in some other investments. I want to make money. Everybody wants to make money, right? But we're talking about funds that have billions of dollars of society, in them, and they're using that money to like bankrupt companies essentially, or lead them to bankruptcy, instead of investing in lots of great companies out there, that are trying to do good things. And other companies, look, I'm drinking Sprite. I think it's owned by Coca-Cola. I love Coca-Cola. I mean, it's not going to change the world, but at least invest in Coca-Cola. It has great dividends,
Coca-Cola has already changed the world.
Yeah. So, I mean, why are you going to go after
juvenile diabetes
and tank it? I mean, come on. I mean, we have better ways to use this money, right? That's
Right, but
the short argument. I don't know.
But shorting isn't this. I think that's a problem. Is shorting isn't necessarily just about destroying a company. I mean, you could destroy a company in other ways.
Yeah, but you make money with shorting, right? I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I could, if I can make money by helping out a competitor company by somehow, finding, like, basically putting out false information that one company's product, like company X's product, is making people ill, and therefore company Y's competitor benefits. I mean, there's shorting. I don't think this is a question whether shorting is evil, or I think we're placing certain moral value judgments upon it. I mean, this is basically the equivalent of saying, well, it's a little bit different because there is capital being raised, but
it's not necessarily that it's evil, but is this the best use for society's money? Is to go out there and essentially, lead, you're going to lead this company to break, essentially, and it's a company that I don't know I don't know the fundamentals of GameStop other than the fact that they're bad, but I mean, there's a lot of GameStop out there. I mean, you drive around the Twin Cities, there's a bunch of GameStops. It's I think it's an international company, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, I don't know if they're going to go bankrupt, maybe, but it's certainly, I don't think it's the best use for those billions of dollars to make sure that this company does go bankrupt soon, and instead of having the chance to maybe turn things around. I don't know.
Right, but this gets into the wisdom of the market. I mean, there were a lot of Blockbusters at one time, and I'm pretty sure there were a lot of people shorting Blockbuster in the early 2000s. I mean, keep in mind, shorting is probably one of the riskiest ways of making money. I mean, you think about a bunch of people were trying to short Tesla stocks this past year, and a lot of them have gotten burned.
Well, that kind of reinforced, I think, the notion that let's just get rid of it, or at least severely regulate. Because if it's risky, if people end up losing money, they keep doing, because they think nobody shorts something thinking that they're going to lose money, right? They think that they're going to make money. So that's why they're committing that money to it. But I mean, I just don't really see a lot of benefit for society in continuing this cycle of like predatory capitalism. I don't.
But
I don't know.
I still think, I'm sorry, I still think you have to look at it in terms of opportunity cost. Like, you have to look at the value of an investment relative to the next best alternative. So in the whole economy, there's a finite amount of money, and that money gets invested in different things. If money is invested in something that doesn't produce as good of a return, or isn't as productive, then it's better to divest from that and reinvest in something more productive, because there's a finite amount. I would say that would be an economist's argument for shorting. It's not now. It's not 100% that clear cut, but that's the very high level argument.
I mean, yeah, you got to look at, again, shorting, like the Tesla example. Tesla wasn't necessarily saved because of a big social media. Obviously, they have a social media presence, but Tesla, there are many certain things that Tesla is doing that does point to that maybe they could be profitable. And not to mention Elon Musk, especially with moves on SpaceX and things like that.
Well, there's also a cult of personality behind Elon Musk, and a lot of people that enter the market, these 30% of people, a lot of these people are idolize Elon Musk, a lot of this young generation. So I don't think it's a coincidence that Tesla jumped, 10x this year that these people enter the market.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, that's certainly part of it. And again, but I'm just using Tesla as an example to say that the shorting doesn't work. And then when you get the short squeeze, that's where it really backfires on people shorting. And part of why Tesla stock is up so much is also due to the short squeeze, because the people shorting it were forced to buy back the stock, in turn driving the price up.
Let me make sure that I understand the perspective here. It is the perspective that Tesla went up because people invested in it, or because what Tesla was doing shows great foresight and value?
I'd say both.
Okay.
So just to to move it along a little bit, let's say we agree to disagree on the short thing. Maybe we need to continue talking about it some other time. But what about just the fact that, other than this GameStop, I think, because a lot of these people also didn't enter the market because of GameStop. I think now a lot of people entered it because of GameStop, but that's certainly not the case for everybody. Out of those 30%, we're talking about many months. People have been entering the stock market, throughout the whole of 2020 after the pandemic. I don't know what it is about the pandemic, but I think it's just that people are home and they have more time. They were looking for other things to do, and a lot of people turned to investing, I guess. But so is it good that this new generation is in the market? And then we can talk about it a little bit and then move on. But what do you guys think about that general idea? I mean, I think Natasha made some good points, but what does the rest of you think about that?
Hey guys, I'm gonna take off.
All right, Frank.
Frank's not into the finance.
We're gonna change topic real soon, Frank. But yeah,
that's all right. I'm gonna take off. See you later.
Yeah,
you're driving Frank out.
Sorry, Frank.
I'm kind of with him in those terms. I guess I'm not enough of a capitalist running dog to really pay that much attention to this stuff.
Okay. Well, we can move on to the next topic then. So, Shir, you've been wanting to talk about why do great civilizations fall, and I understand that you also want to talk about, has America reached its peak as a civilization? So maybe we can turn to that.
We can do that. Otherwise, did we want to talk about the science piece for Craig?
About what?
I don't think doesn't seem to be a lot of general interest in that, Sashir, so I don't know. It's okay.
Okay, I was saying we should save it for you, Craig, from last week.
I appreciate that, but
well, what's the top? What is the question, Craig?
Well, did you see about the piece that Sashir posted in the group, on the group page?
I'll post the link again to the chat.
Yes.
Okay, we can do it next week. We'll
Okay.
Yeah. I'll
That'll work.
Maybe people need a bit of preparation for that one. So yeah. So why do great civilizations fall, and has America reached its peak as a civilization? Maybe we can move on to that second topic.
Well, they fall for.
You're the one who's proposing the topic, so you want to.
Sure. Yeah. Well, because I've been watching, speaking of podcast called "The Fall of Civilizations," which is pretty good. Which has been covering a lot of just looking at history. It's a real kind of history nerds podcast. But yeah, obviously in human history, I mean, we've had a lot of civilizations come and go, and there's a lot of indicators now that our current civilization is kind of teetering on the edge, that there's a lot of things that could push it completely over. If you think about, there's stuff like, obviously there's environmental catastrophes. It's kind of one of the big things that happens, and particularly regarding it, like climate change. And then you also get political instability, part of kind of related to what we're talking about. You do get stability is often formed by kind of a wealth gap, even in ancient civilizations. I mean, obviously you get the movement of because we're kind of more of a global civilization now, but previous civilizations obviously had neighbors or new people who came by and overthrew them was another issue. But a lot of times for any kind of major civilization, there's a combination of factors that usually pushes it over. And a lot of times when they start falling, the kind of peak of the point of the civilization, most people don't realize. And so at the time, take Rome, the seeds of kind of Rome's destruction were already happening, hundreds of years before Rome actually fell, or before Rome was sacked by the Visigoths. So there's kind of an multitude of factors, and you kind of wonder, well, is this happening to us? Is there anything that can be done about it?
So what would be the parallels between the fall of Rome and the fall of the American Empire?
The parallels between there's one, and this is kind of the concentration of power, kind of the movement. Now, Rome as an empire survived quite a bit when it moved from the Republic, but you did start having just a concentration of executive power within the imperial. And that's been one that I think is a problem here with the U.S., is how power is becoming more centralized within the U.S. Now we're still a ways from that. I mean, we did just have an election, and even though it was kind of shaky, there was the transfer of power. The transfer of power still did happen. So there was that. There's also the kind of structure of Rome in terms of its economy was based upon, they kind of stopped expanding after a while, because initially it was driven by expansion, but then it became a very top heavy system where basically you had the centralization of power within Rome itself, yet Rome itself really wasn't producing anything. And so it was kind of very dependent upon the imperial kind of trade network. And there does come questions about that, about how much we're producing. There was also a plague. There was the plague of Antoninus, really did a lot of damage. Incompetent leadership was another big factor. So we're not quite seeing those exact things here, but these certainly are problems. And I would say there's kind of an issue here about, in terms of how our government, relationship of our people to our government, I think is a big factor, the centralization of power within it. And I think on top of that, we're obviously dealing with a plague right now. It's not nearly as bad as the plague of Antoninus, thankfully, but has exposed, I'd say COVID's exposed a bunch of weaknesses within our society. I mean, it was one of the worst things that could happen. I mean, thankfully it's not as bad, but it kind of showed that one, basically ineffective leadership at top. That was one. This kind of distrust among our society is a big issue, where we can't really agree upon, get complete mutual agreement upon how we can't even get agreement about whether we should be wearing masks. I mean, stuff like that, where we left it kind of the reverse, I guess, of separate power, where we kind of left it somehow to the states, but didn't coordinate it. And at the same time, a distrust of international organizations. So there's go ahead.
The question, Bruno, it was, what has America reached its peak?
Yeah, in the context of the civilizations falling. So, I think Sashiria wants to ask us if America's time is done, as the primary power in the world, and why do great powers fall? The last one to fall was Britain, really, because Britain was the greatest power, and then it was where's the British Empire now? Right?
I think the Soviet Union might object to that statement.
Right. Yeah.
What do we mean by fall?
Right. I was just going to say, are we talking about fall from number one, or are we talking about?
Well, fall, yes. There's a couple of things. I mean, the fall of, we kind of have the fall of civilization in terms of the collapse of the Roman Empire, the collapse of the Sumerian empires. That's a true collapse. That's where it's not just a political collapse, but literally it's apocalypse. If we get to the point, and I'm not saying that we will get to that point, where basically we live in a Mad Max. 20 years from now, it's like Mad Max.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't know all these what do you call it, like references? Does that mean like anarchy? Does that mean it breaks up into different countries?
But look, Michael.
Oh, yeah.
The Soviet Union. Did you just mention it, or maybe it was Natasha? But the Soviet Union was a pretty comprehensive collapse. That's why they have Putin right now. It doesn't necessarily need to be Mad Max level, but
no, right, yeah. That's a little extreme, though. I'm not.
But that was more recent than Great Britain.
Right.
Well, great. Yes, that is true. That was more recent. But what I meant by that, by Great Britain, you guys are absolutely right. The Soviet Union is even a better example because the UK, does relatively fine. But I don't know for how long. I mean, the Brit. What?
You're talking about Brexit.
No, well, I'm just talking about the shift of power from the Soviet Union was basically a co-power with the United States, but really the United States and the Soviet Union replaced Great Britain as the foremost power in the world. That was what I meant. And then, the British Empire had its companion empire was the French Empire. Those were kind of the big two, and then they were replaced by the United States and the Soviet Union after World War II. So that's what I meant.
Well, right. The British pretty much defeated the French. I mean, the French Empire was not, after Napoleon, there really wasn't much of a French Empire left.
Well, no, that's not true, man. That's not true. But the French Empire is pretty relevant in the 19th century and early 20th century. It wasn't as powerful as the British, but it was the second most powerful empire in the world. So,
Again, as far
that's
as the French
second,
are
not
concerned,
close.
Sashir, I would say Vietnam would be a pretty good reference to the still influence of the French into the mid 20th century.
Oh, sure. No, the French had influence. They just didn't really have much of an empire. I mean, it was.
They had the second biggest empire in the world after.
But that's no, actually, because even Russia then land area was bigger. Yeah, the French had territories.
Without counting without counting Russia, yeah.
Right, the French had territories. It just wasn't.
Well, but the French had much more influence, and they also had they had substantial holdings. I mean, they had a good part of Africa. Like that's a big part of the world. They had like Algeria. They had there's French-speaking countries. There's like 20 countries now in Africa that were former French colonies. So we're talking.
Right, they were former, but they kind of lost them compared to how big the British had Canada, Australia, and India alone. That was probably bigger.
Well, I'm not saying the French was bigger, but I mean, this is not really that relevant. I mean, you go look at the map of the French, it was pretty big, but I mean, it doesn't really matter. So the European empires, I mean, were pretty relevant. I mean, after that, the Soviet Union and the United States kind of took over as the world powers. But so yeah, there has been a collapse of these great civilizations.
America is not on the brink of collapse. That's my vote.
Okay, well, tell us a little bit about that. Yeah, this proves Sashir's thesis.
No, I just think that we are still still have a really strong grasp of front-running technology. We aren't as far in some of the industries as certain other countries, but the range, the diversity of technologies that we put a lot of money into both researching and producing, as well as buying, I think we still have a really strong competitive economy as a country. And I think it has a very strong future as well.
Are we taking GDP per capita as the measure of a good, I guess, prospering country, or?
What did you ask me?
So, like, are we using GDP per capita as our measure of whether the U.S.
I don't know what that number is. So no, I'm not using that.
That's basically wealth per person, Natasha. That's basically how much wealth.
No, I mean, I don't know what the number is.
Oh.
I don't know what it is compared on the world scale. And no, that's not what I was using.
We actually don't have the highest per capita GDP. We're actually,
I mean, not even
a little ways
close.
down. Yeah.
But it's pretty high. It's pretty high. But
no, I was just talking about the diversity of technologies and research and consumerism. I think I'm not talking at all about financial distribution. No, but I'm talking about specifically technologies and production and yes, and the diversification of it, which I think is a really important factor. Okay, Craig.
So I'm taking a theory of statistics class at the moment through the university in the College of Science and Engineering. And one of the interesting things that I note when I look on the roster of students who are enrolled in this course is probably over 60, maybe 70 some percent of them have names which are, I think one might say, decidedly East Asian in origin. So we may have had a leadership in technological fields. I don't think we can say that that is still true. And I think you can see that what we mathematical types would call the second derivative is changing in such a way that that's gonna switch, if it hasn't already, will switch before I die.
Well,
Lead in any of the fields compared to any single country. The diversification, the fact that we host many and we invest in a variety of things, like what we were talking about a few weeks ago, the specialization. So rather than specializing and becoming the best in any single category, I think what America has always been good at is being a front runner in many categories, that whole jack of all trades type concept. And I think that's one thing that has been, kind of the MO of America, and it's something we're still really good at. And that's why I think we are still keeping it live. And politically, it's messy, but it's everybody's messy politically these days. Everybody.
So I think we have been in the forefront of that, but as our previous discussion, maybe 3 weeks ago or whatever it was on the subject of education, I think tends to point out is that I think the educational trends in the United States are not going in a way that will further something like technological leadership. I think that, and I think that's a big problem, and I have no freaking clue how to solve it.
About public education mostly, though. There's still a wealth of private education that is exactly what feeds into those scholarly roles.
Yeah, except a lot of the private education in this country is religious based, and that is not something that's going to invent new vaccines or get my ship to Enceladus to see if there's life there or something like that. So that that I think I think you need to be careful about falling into a trap of seeing things the way that they were in the past rather than the way that they are perhaps currently.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think Natasha's right. Yes, we do have a lot. I mean, we are still a creative culture. I mean, universities are still among the top in the world. That said, I think there's a lot of unevenness in our society. I mean, I think we've got, even as at the same time, you're right, we do have a lot of creativity, we do have a lot of investment, diversity, but there are other factors that I think are real drags upon our society. And I think we're seeing a lot of factors. I mean, let's face it, there's just a damn lot of ignorance out there. And there's a lot, and what we're seeing recently was basically a lot of misinformation, a lot of unbelief in things that are really troubling signs to that. And it just kind of depends, because again, there's a problem with where our leadership is where our leadership's going to go.
If Trump had won again, I would have had a much more bleak response. But the fact that a change in leadership that Americans got out and in the largest numbers we've ever seen showed a more active investment on the personal level in the the future of America. And I think it was just a really significant sign that people are willing to fight for keeping the country intact, for correcting errors, for doing what's necessary to make sure that this country stays afloat and prosperous. And that's really all I'm saying, is that yes, there are obviously huge issues that need to be figured out and ironed out, as there really have always been. But I just think that there are also a lot of indications that the problems are not insurmountable, not absolutely insurmountable. Certainly they could be fucked up and it could all collapse, but I'm saying they're not definitely insurmountable. And I think the Americans chose and have indicated that they want to figure out the problems, and represented the strength and the will to do so. And I think that's really what it takes.
Right. Yes. Let's not forget 74 million people still voted for Trump. And we just saw on January 6th.
It at all.
Right. And there were plenty of people went and stormed the Capitol. I mean, that's
deep issues to resolve. Yes.
Right. Yes, it's a hopeful sign, but this election did not really settle much. We're still a divided country. I mean, the Senate is it's a 50-50 split right now. And
then again, you can say the United States has been, divided before. The 19th century saw a very divided country. There was a civil war, and in this case, yeah, the capital thing is bad, but it's not as bad as the Civil War, right? So, I mean, I'm just pointing out things haven't always been perfect, right? I mean,
no, I agree. Yeah, we've always had political division. That's not saying that alone will bring us down. There's a variety of factors, and there's no, like I said, with the fall of civilization, like the fall of Rome, there was no real single factor that brought down Rome. Now, some of the smaller places, yes, you could point out there's certain single factors that brought them down, but there's just a confluence of factors. And I think we are seeing a confluence. A political division is definitely one of those factors. And there's a real impact in that, I think, especially in our response to COVID, is how poor of our response is primarily due to political division. Because wearing a mask or saying, well, maybe we shouldn't have a Super Bowl party has actually become a partisan issue. Or it's not just a partisan issue, it's a tribal issue. It's an issue of identity.
Would that have been an issue 40 years ago? Would we have had the same thing where like one side is like, oh, you should wear a mask, and the other is like, oh, you shouldn't?
Craig, you could probably speak more to this, but from what I've seen in history, I don't think we've ever seen something like this regarding a pandemic. I know in 1918 there were people who refused to wear a mask and do stuff. There was an anti-mask league, but they didn't. It didn't quite seem like they had the same amount of following.
Yeah, I mean, I don't recall anything of this kind of a sweeping nature. I think
you don't remember 1918, Craig?
I'm afraid
I was asking you, Craig.
I remember having read about 1918, but I do not having read about. And of course, as we all know, the Spanish flu originated in Kansas. So
did it?
But well, yes. But what I recall.
I did not know that.
Come on, Craig, give us your first person experience.
People would have been more interested in is trying to find out who to sue rather than worrying about fighting about things like masks.
The irony is the Spanish flu was called the Spanish flu because Spain was the first country to admit they had a problem.
No way, that's great.
Right.
And the King of Spain caught it.
Kansas?
What?
The King of Spain caught the Spanish flu.
Yeah, I don't.
Really?
Huh.
Wow.
Well, let me.
So it started in Kansas, and it was called the Spanish flu, and it killed like.
Well, let me make a couple of comments.
It's crazy.
Based on what I'm hearing, and I feel like maybe this will further the conversation. I don't know. But I'll give you some of my perspective. Something that came to mind while we were talking, or there was a contemporary of, I think it was a contemporary of Mark Twain, or maybe it was Mark Twain himself, that said, unfortunately, now I added unfortunately, it's easier to fool people than to convince them they have been fooled. And that is part of the struggle of a divided country. I think. That's my opinion. I also think that things are way better than they were in the past. We still have problems, and we still need to argue about them, but we should argue, not fight. And as far as the supremacy of America in any field, we have to consider, one of my goals is that that humanity becomes a global society, globalization. And if that is a goal, then there is always going to be somebody who is better at something than you are. And if somewhere between America being the best at everything and the world progressing in globalization means somebody is going to be better at something than we are. We just have to accept that and celebrate it, I think. And I also think most people in the world are good. And I also do not think that wealth is synonymous with evil. And none of you all have said that directly, anything like that. But that's the premise of my thinking. So I just thought I would share that.
I certainly don't think wealth is synonymous with evil. I think it can in certain situations, but as a general fact, no, I don't.
I think that many people believe that. And
yeah, I think
it hurts us, I think, because if you just think for a minute about every movie and television show that you've ever seen, 99.9% of them portray wealthy people as evil.
Have you ever seen a romantic comedy?
Well, I don't know about that because I don't watch
like
that
the whole
stuff.
field is where like
yeah, but exactly the opposite.
Get with a rich person. So they all rom-coms say wealth is like the ideal for you. So
what about Pretty Woman?
Vast part of media
like Coming to America, right? Coming to America with
right.
That if you Eddie Murphy, oh, that's such a good movie.
If you're lucky and you're good, then you get all the monies.
That's true. Romantic comedies do have that.
In some media that wealth is for good people, that you deserve wealth if you're good.
See, David, Natasha just pointed out that you're missing out on romantic comedies. This will change.
I've only seen like 2, and I
change your outlook.
What about like 50 First Dates or something?
Yeah, actually, I think it works both ways.
Honestly, I don't get this from rom-coms. I get this from all Disney princess movies.
Disney princess,
like The Notebook.
All the stuff, David, that you're missing out on.
So that was a pretty fancy house in The Notebook. I will say that. Yes, yeah. The lake house was very, very expensive.
That was a big house, man. How was he able? That movie did not explain how he had money to build that.
So maybe all media geared towards men shows wealth as being for bad people, but all media geared towards little girls is wealth is for good little girls.
It's the princess cliche, Cinderella. Yeah.
Well, I do think that society as a whole globally still suffers from history written by kings and queens or under their guidance, because we still have stories and romanticize about princes and princesses and kings and queens and things like that. And prior to the United States, there were not any governments in the world where people selected the leaders, where the laws were designed to limit the government. That didn't exist before the United States. And some people don't think that in the United States, but I think they should.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, without counting, not counting the old stuff, the Athens and Rome, but yeah, you're right. And maybe Haiti. I think Haiti, it's kind of incredible, but I think Haiti is the first democracy in the modern world. But I mean, it wasn't as robust as the American democracy.
I think the one of the complicated mentalities about wealth in the United States is kind of what I was just referring to, is how a large part of the population has linked wealth to faith. And you can blame the televangelists, you can blame the vast amount of media that came out during the Depression, the escapist mentality, where in order to get through bad things, you invest in fantasies of having everything that you want. And it has created this sensation where they don't want to limit wealth because they don't want to have to limit their own fantasy. They don't want to have to limit the possibility that they could have all of their dreams come true and have to wrestle with what is reality. And I think that's where it ends up being so hard to convince people that that there is a too much, because then once you start talking about wealth in real terms and in real numbers, then it's no more a fantasy, and then it's no longer an escape, and then it's no longer faith. And you take out of all of these emotional ties to this impression of wealth that are, when emotion is what drives most people's decision making. Most people make decisions emotionally, and there's a bunch of documentaries about that and how big a part of that life is. So I think that's why they stormed the Capitol. That's why there was such a split with Trump, is because of this very factual part of being human. And it's hard to backpedal that kind of connection with wealth and fulfillment when we've been doing it to ourselves for such a long time, and we've been doing it to our children, and we've been doing it as soon as we started getting the ability to watch television. Basically, I'm sure there were, before that, people were not as widely literate, so you can't really indoctrinate as well through just books. So the question is, how do we treat that? I think we would see better decision making in voting and political spheres if we were able to treat that in the common person.
So,
Well,
I understand what you're saying. So the real challenge is how do we persuade people to view things a certain way through a lens or whatever, if we know they have been looking through the wrong one. And to me, ideas, good or bad, cannot be defeated with guns. Absolutely not. It certainly didn't defeat the United States. It didn't defeat the concept of freedom anywhere in the world. Anywhere. Even if a country is defeated, it did not defeat the concept. And so my challenge, and really I think a challenge for everybody, is how do we persuade other people? You know, if they have an emotional reaction to a particular idea, then maybe we need to speak to that emotional part of them.
Exactly.
If
It
they
can't be
have a
logic.
logical perspective, maybe we need to speak to, or maybe we need to do both. You know,
It has to basically, you have to come up with something that is just as magnetic as the lure of wealth and dreams. So, which is a tall order. How do you replace? How do you make deep satisfaction? How do you express that in a way that is readily accessible? How do you represent a participation in a functional community where everybody is kind of is taken care of, rather than it being like a rat race? How do you express that in a simple, magnetic way that where, you know, wealth comes with its own sparkles? So how do you dress up a more pragmatic way of building a society? And because that's really the only way to make it happen, because you're dealing with emotions. I don't have the answer, but I think that's figuring out how to do that is how you persuade.
Well, I think you can take comfort in the fact that nobody else has ever had the answer to that one either.
Well, I mean, I think,
yeah, you missed out on the Nobel Prize.
What did he say?
I said you missed out on the Nobel Prize.
I missed out.
Sashir is back from the pub again.
Yeah.
Well,
did you just appear out of a manhole in the street there?
No, I went into the pub to grab beer. Yeah, you weren't looking.
Well, it's a basement bar. It's a basement bar off to the.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a hole in the wall. You know?
It looks crowded. You must be important. You went to the front of the line?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
You're a regular. I think I mean, yeah, I mean, I think both Natasha and David, at least, you know, they gave you some pretty good adversarial views in relation to your America is falling thesis. I mean, I think there's definitely pros and cons to each theory. But I mean, I do agree, like what Natasha said about, you know, Biden winning, for example. I mean, that is a sign of something, you know. Yes, there's still a lot of division, but just like, you know, the Union beating the Confederacy, you know, meant something. I think also, I mean, this is a much smaller scale, but still, it is a direction, right? A direction has been, you know, chosen for not the foreseeable future, but for 8 years, which, you know, in our technological world is still pretty long time. Who knows if with climate change, you know, things are going to be the same in 8 years. That's and I'm going to transition to what David said real fast before you retort. I also like what he said about the fact that this is not Rome anymore, right? This is not the ancient world, and this is not even the colonial world anymore of the European empires. Maybe, yeah. I mean, America is
it's not
strong,
an
but
empire,
this is
but you could describe it.
World. This is a globalized world, and really we are talking about a system that is global. Capitalism is global, liberal democracy is global, and hopefully we'll find even better ways to globalize and to give prosperity and security to people all over the globe. So maybe it's not about America being, first. It's maybe it's the opposite. It's about the world figuring out how to work together. So in 8 years from now, things are not fundamentally different because of climate change, because we were able to start tackling issues like that. So in a way, what you're asking about civilizations falling, at this point, maybe we're talking about humanity. We're talking about humanity here, not the United States.
Right. I will say this: the U.S.
Well, but maybe I don't know. You guys figure out.
The U.S. being the number one country is not. We're not going to be the number one country. I think that's already a given. I think the direction doesn't mean we're going to become some backwater, but I think the decline of the U.S. in terms of has this American hegemony is already happening, and I'm not sure there's really much way of reversing it.
What's the measuring, the number one at what?
We're not, in terms of economic size, no, China is going to overtake us within like 5 years.
Like gross.
Right. The gross domestic product, China is going to overtake us. That's going to happen. In terms of
or overall?
Overall.
Okay, but does that really?
Yeah, that doesn't
really
mean everything.
A number one country being able to create a well-running machine is still a machine. When you're talking about a country of persons, I just wonder if gross domestic, if that number is not really what we should be striving for in the first place.
Oh, but I think in most other measures, in terms of global influence, yeah, we're going to decline. That's already happening. I mean, the one thing we have going for, yes, we're the second.
We can't have globalization and be the number one country.
Yes, basically, it's not going to happen. I mean, one thing that's going to keep us really relevant is, besides our market size, which will still be big for a long time, we'll still be bigger than it's also that we've got such a large military. I mean, that will basically, I mean, we're the military of NATO. NATO can't function without us. I mean, that's going to keep us relevant. We're going to be relevant for a long time, just in terms of this idea that the world follows the US, I think is already passed in terms of that. But if we come down to kind of what's going to happen in terms of, I agree. Yes. There's emotions, a big issue. This again comes down to this issue of leadership. If we talk about emotion, there's the part of kind of the appeal of Trump has always been aspirational. Trump is the whole idea of the apprentice and all that stuff was aspiration, was saying, look at me, I'm getting rich. A lot of his appeal was saying but a lot of it's driven, the Tea Party movement, stuff like that was driven by grievance. And there's a lot of reason. I mean, we could say, well, these are just angry white men, Craig, David, Michael. But I mean, there still is reason. I mean, I know people who are diehard Trump supporters, and yeah, I'll say they probably do have reasons to be angry. They've seen basically their way of life, culture change around them. And I think to them, that's a lot more of a driving factor than really thinking that, well, I'm going to get rich under Trump. I think a lot of these people accept they're not going to get rich. They just have this feeling when you hear them saying they're losing America. That's their feeling. Is what?
I said, are you sure they accept that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I know some Trump supporters relatively well. And yeah, they're not believing they're going to get rich anytime soon. I think they accept that, but they do have this very strong sense that kind of the America they know, they're losing America. This is one thing you hear a lot, is we're losing the country. And who they're losing it to: socialists, immigrants, Muslims, you name it. They're losing it to a bunch of people. you know, AOC, Ilhan Omar, the people they're losing it to. And yeah, and that's kind of extreme. They're kind of scapegoating, but if you talk about a lot of these people live in like rural America or ex-urban, you know, like the suburb, like the kind of just border of the urban and rural area of Twin Cities. And yeah, their economy is not done well. I mean, for a lot of these people, their manufacturing is gone, farming's taken a hit. Ironically, it took a hit because of Trump's policies, but that said, they're still blaming it on other people. And a lot of them feel like when they grew up, you know, this was a country for white men. And it's, you know, sorry, David, Craig, Michael, it's getting less and less that in terms of, but that's kind of the same parallel as that you could say, well, this was a pluralistic country. White men happen to be on top.
You say that like you think we should be bothered by that fact.
Or
And
like you think
I will
telling
break
you.
the news to you. I am not.
You might not be bothered, but there are a lot of people who are. But this is what's happening to America. Is America was on top for most of the Cold War. I mean, we were fighting Russia, but basically for quote the free world, yeah, America was on top. And now America is just going to be another country. I mean, it'll be a big, powerful country, but it's not going to be lead. But that's kind of the same feeling.
Yeah, our GDP per capita, if you look per person, ours is 60,000 versus China's is 8,000. So because China has so much more people, the total amount might start catching up to us. But on a per person basis, I think it'll still be a while, in my opinion.
Yeah, but you could argue Switzerland, Singapore, you know, have a higher per capita GDP than the U.S.
Switzerland does. Does Singapore?
Singapore does, yes. Singapore overtook the U.S. about 10 years ago. But Japan, I think, does. But that doesn't necessarily translate into them being global powers. I mean, obviously, they don't have the size as we do. They'll have the military. Well, Switzerland doesn't want to have, they don't want to get involved with other people. So I'm not, again, there's a lot of different factors. I mean, yes, Americans will have money. We're not going to be destitute. We're not going to be a third world country anytime soon. Not saying it's not possible, but the decline's going to be a long, slow decline. There still is a possibility that we could suffer some major catastrophe. It's doing that.
Well,
but I think it's inevitable the U.S. is going to decline.
I'm kind of happy I'm escaping the white man shaming here this year.
No, you're Brazilian. You're like a we'll give you the break on that. Unless you're like actually pure Portuguese, then you're a colonizer.
Yeah, I grew up in Portugal. In Lisbon.
Oh, really? Okay, well, fine. We'll throw you in.
But I don't want to be in there. I mean, that seems.
We're tossing you in.
That's
you're in that bucket.
I don't want to be in that bucket. I'm happy I'm out of it because it seems pretty. No, I'm kidding.
It's all right. I didn't realize you were that Portuguese. I thought you were.
I don't know. I'm not in the Anglo-Saxon category anyway. So. But I don't think, I think like Craig, David, and Michael are not the kind of people you're talking about at all, so.
No, I'm not. I'm not.
I think he knows that.
I'm just pointing out they are the white men in the group.
Don't judge me by the color of my skin.
Oh, I'm judging you. I'm all about the judging. We're getting judgmental here. I keep on saying philosophy group needs to get more judgmental.
I look forward to the day when skin color is as insignificant as hair color.
People still definitely have prejudices against certain.
No.
What about all the blonde folks?
I look forward to that day.
I have to wonder while we're talking about number one and who's on top. So the glory days of the US, right? Mostly were built on the backs of cheap labor and exploitation of many, right? So we achieved being number one by making sure that we had very cheap labor. And that's why I said, is gross domestic product really what defines being a number one nation? Is, wow, okay. Is it possible for the world, as we strive towards this globalization, as we strive towards practices that we hold each other accountable to, and how to treat the people within our countries as well as those who are coming in and going out and all that kind of stuff, is it possible that the measurements of number one will also change because of the way that the companies start to countries start to function a little bit differently, as they start to value their citizens perhaps a little bit better and try to create more sustainable independent living? Or are we going to keep defining it by just by economic?
Well, I think, to your point, I think what you're trying to say, how I would say what you're trying to say, is that wealth is not just measured in money. Wealth is measured in freedom of speech, in equality, things like that.
Well, that's why
I think soft power
have those things.
I think soft power also plays a role in why America is successful with like TV shows, and just people around the world copy the style that is portrayed here. The movies are played everywhere. There's just this consumption of our media and our culture where it's not the same for, like, we don't like consume like French stuff or Chinese culture or like South Korean or Japan. Like, we have a thing for Japan now here. And then I think even though Japan is a small country, they still have like influence in our culture, especially among the youth, because of their anime, right? And so, like, I think there's rarely some shows that come from the UK that's really popular in America. So I would also say soft power matters.
I don't know. BTS has been selling out tours.
Oh yeah, that singing thing. See, that's even newer. That's even newer than when I was younger. Like, kids these days love it, and I don't like. I talk to some people and they don't know what they're saying, but they still love it. Which is interesting.
Go ahead, Craig.
Just two things, I think, from what Natasha was saying. One of them is when you talk about how Americans' prosperity was built, you're actually describing pretty much how all of Western civilization's prosperity was built, right? We've been doing that for generations and many hundreds of years. And the other point I would make is that the US did not really become the major player in the world until the late 30s and after World War II, when all of Europe, of course, their manufacturing and food producing capabilities had been devastated, and ours were relatively untouched. That was really the impetus that drove the US to the forefront, because we had the factories, we had the food supplies to feed the factory workers, to largely build up that enormous military, which, as I kind of point out, and as we probably all know, right, US military spending pretty much is equal and surpasses the rest of the world put together. And that's when how we were able to do that, is because we didn't have all of our factories that bombed the shit out of them during the war. So it's actually a more recent phenomenon than I think we're giving it credit for, is kind of what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah, we lucked out in some sense, in terms of that we were the last major country standing after World War II. I mean, going into World War II, Germany was the most advanced country. But
I think it's really unfortunate that there are swaths of the population who have this impression of this really strong world power that is the United States that really hasn't been a thing for very long, and the strength of it is questionable, and has been that, and it's kind of a fraud,
Yeah, so
and yet they're losing it. It's unfortunate. The miseducation of the population, not just ignorance, but you know.
So I think, Sashir, you'll probably maybe agree with this, but one of Jared Diamond's theses in his writings is that North America in particular got to where it is largely through dumb luck, and that there wasn't anything especially special about it. It's just that the historical circumstances worked in our favor, and that whole thing kind of snowballed into the rise of, well, mostly the rise of the US, but the rise of North America in general.
Well, yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, I've read Jared Diamond's thing about that. Yeah, and there's, because of the land area of the U.S. and the richness of its resources, and it just happened that, well, for the European settlers, it just happened that the previous occupants hadn't been able to fully exploit that, and not to mention they didn't have the same resistance to the diseases really that were brought over. I mean, yeah, it's, if things had turned out differently, you know, maybe the Huron, you know, might have built an actual empire and might have developed technology, and we would be living, the world we're living in now would be very different. But that wasn't the case. I mean, yeah, there's luck plays a role in a lot of this. There's certainly, I mean, I don't think any of this really was planned. I mean, people have visions, but how it turned out. But anyway, I think there's a couple of questions here when I talk about the fall of civilizations and stuff. I do think there is a chance, and not just the U.S. And again, I'm putting this out there. I'm not saying I absolutely believe it, but putting this out there for discussion, that the modern human civilization that we have now could collapse. In terms of, we could, you know, 100 years from now, we could have a Mad Max world. Now, is that likely? I'll be honest, I don't really know. I don't think necessarily it is, but I think there's a lot of stuff to worry about the state of humanity.
I personally, I don't know either, but I personally think that it's interesting, and somebody said this. I can't remember who said it, but so I'm paraphrasing and butchering a quote. Why is it that when we see nothing but progress behind us, I mean, you know, things were bad and they got better, and they're still bad, but they're getting better. Why is it when we see nothing but progress behind us, we imagine nothing but misery ahead of us? That doesn't make sense. But it may be the fear or the concern that things could be bad that helps us anticipate and overcome them.
Well, I have a simple answer for that one, David. When one looks back at what one thinks is progress, one also has to ask, what was the cost of that progress, and when does the bill come due? And I think that's where your projectionists on naysayers are looking, is when is that bill coming due?
Yeah, well, I understand that, but I'm talking about the progress of humanity. I'm not talking about that I can just flip a switch and a light comes on in my room, although that's part of it. But you know, I'm not talking about exploiting other people to get what's well for me. You know, I don't.
Yeah, but there's also the exploitation of nature that needs to be brought into consideration with this, and that's a bill that is more rapidly becoming due every day.
Yes, I agree.
I think it's an interesting question as to like, how do you develop a better indicator than just GDP to bring a more sustainable development of the human race? Because, Craig, you're absolutely right. Like going from horses and chariots to locomotives, there was a small cost. It was nascent, but now with the rapacious advance of technology and the way we are exploiting the natural resources around us, sustainability is at peril. And you know, part of the change like happens like at a tipping point in like in a human race, when we see that like, oh my gosh, if we don't do something, climate change is going to affect us and it will be irreversible. So then what we are seeing is the advent of electric cars and electric technology and energy credits for but if as long as there is a big nexus of the military industrial complex in our political policy making, it would be hard to wean the GDP as an economic indicator to be like gone or obliterated or to be softened with something which is more, which is, and I don't know what that something more is, but like something which is more geared towards progress of Earth as a whole, where everyone realizes that like we are interdependent, and yeah, as long as we're like siloed between United States and Europe and different countries having their own, it's going to be very difficult.
Well, Natasha's going to have to go. Thanks.
I didn't want to interrupt.
Natasha.
Yeah. Bye. Have a good night. Well,
Yeah.
To answer David Pender, well, one, I keep on seeing problems in the future because if you look at history, yeah, there's been several civilizations that collapsed. I think it's looks like, yeah, there's just kind of human nature that civilizations are going to rise and fall. I think it's one. Just to get to Rupender, there actually have been economists who have been looking at developing kind of other factors besides GDP that take into account things like environmental. There's things like the happiness index or the misery index. It's one of my favorites.
Yep.
That include factors like GDP, but also quality of life that look at mortality and things. So, yeah, but.
And we carry in our pockets the sum of human knowledge.
Right. And what do we use it for? To argue with strangers on the internet? I mean,
and watch cat videos.
And cat videos, yes. I'm all down for.
I like.
But yeah, to get back to David's question, I think a big component of people's happiness is how they're doing relative to other people. And that cannot be solved by any amount of technological progress, because there will always be people at the bottom and people at the top. And so I feel like that's part of the reason why there's always a good amount of people who are discontented. Yeah.
I really think so. As long as like the basic needs of the person are met and they become a little bit more evolved in the Buddhist philosophy, do you think this will there'll still be like, oh, the Joneses across the street are much better than economically than me, so I need to do, make thousands more dollars to compete with their Teslas and different cars,
I think basic needs go a long way and help mitigate the problem a lot. But I feel like there still is a keeping up with the Joneses part of human nature, and that I don't know if we were all like Buddhist experts, would we be able to get around that? I don't know, maybe.
Well,
there's a danger, I think. I understand what you're saying, Michael, but I think there's a danger in just assuming, oh, that's human nature and we can't do anything about that. And
I don't think it is, but I think there may be some things we can do about it. I think we just haven't figured it out yet.
Well, I think that to play within by the rule book, that we should persuade other people that our idea is better. And maybe it's not always. We should have that discussion. We should figure it out. We used to do that in Congress, but we don't anymore. But they don't argue anymore. They fight. And there's a difference between argument and fighting.
Right. There's no longer debate. That's the key. But to follow Michael's term, there's a term called kiasu, which is in Hokkien, but it's actually in Singapore, which basically means fear of falling behind or getting ahead. And it's kind of one of the things that drives Singaporean society is that you're always trying to get up ahead of your neighbor. And that's one reason why Singapore's society is one, it's become successful and they've made a lot of money. It's worked in that sense, but also it's kind of a shallow, very materialistic society.
Yeah, and in some ways, I think modern society has amplified that competitive aspect of human nature, just because we have, we just watch TV and we can see all the richest people and all the most beautiful people, and we go on social media, we see all the best aspects of everyone, and so I think it's maybe amplified that negative aspect of our personality.
Well, there's that too, but I'll go back to this idea behind Trump, what drives the support of Trump or Trump supporters. This idea of grievance. And yeah, you can say that, being a middle-aged white guy, Craig, David, is that, yeah, they're not doing bad. It's not like suddenly, they've lost their, even though they'll claim they're losing their rights and stuff like that. It is a sense that society at one point catered to older white guys. And it doesn't really. We're much more of a pluralistic society now.
But even the idea, I don't even understand like what you mean by like white guys, like, because like, do you mean like people of European descent? Because that's
yes.
That's what I understand by like white people. And,
yes.
And like for example, like I grew up in Europe, like that's not. I mean, I think I guess it's just hard for me to understand because it's like a pretty
Europe,
American concept.
It's not an American concept. Europe's got the same issue. It's a fear of multiculturalism.
Yeah, but you have people from like lots of different ethnicities in Europe, and different nationalities, and like white doesn't really like mean like much.
I don't think I'd be too keen on being a Muslim immigrant trying to move into a country in Europe these days. So I'm not sure I can see that point.
Right,
but that's a religious thing. That's a religious thing, and there is there's a problem of integration, right? Because I mean, it makes sense. Like it's hard for a Muslim person to integrate unless they leave aside some of their some of their ways of life, in Europe, because it's not a religious society, or at least it's not a Muslim society. It's kind of a Christian society still.
Right, but the same arguments are brought up here. But you look at what's fueling the far right in Europe, it's all targeting immigration.
But that's the thing. It's kind of like a made up concept. Like there is no real such thing as this thing that they're imagining. Like this idea of like white people. I mean, there's so many different peoples in Europe, like it's just like, it's people like grouping, like taking a bunch of like different people and just grouping them into a notion that makes sense to them, but it's not really true even. It made sense. I guess it made sense before to some extent when it was just like Indians, the people that were here before, Native Americans and the newcomers. And then I guess they brought in slaves. But I mean, at this point, I mean, you have people from all over the world that come here and it just, it's a lot more complex than that. At this point, it's like the Nazis came up with this idea of the Aryan people. Like, those people didn't exist. It wasn't a real thing. It's invented categories. The real people weren't the real people. Just like, the Jews were not all that different from the Aryan people. It was kind of made up. It's
Right,
stuff
the
that-
Aryans were actually Middle Eastern people.
Well, Aryans were actually Indians.
Well,
Rupender,
yeah,
I think,
yeah.
is actually probably more
But they were
Aryan
called
than most
Aryans,
German
it's
people.
just not even Aryans,
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I think we're falling into kind of like the same thing here.
Yes, we are. It's certainly, no, I agree. But humans are tribal by nature. That's another issue. Why humans have problems, because we're tribal.
Well, the if an alien, if an advanced alien civilization came here
I think
and
that we can change.
and ask, what have we done? And we gave them a list of our accomplishments. Almost all of them are overcoming problems of our own creation.
It's true. We make up a lot of these problems.
Well, it's not.
Racism, poverty,
We create a bunch of problems and then we have to deal
not
with.
having freedom of, all of those are overcoming things that we made, but those are accomplishments. But to me, well, enough said.
Right. We're not. But that said, yeah, I don't think we're as racist as we were, 50 years ago. I mean, that said, there's still, even as we're speaking right now, there's still ethnic cleansing going on in all different parts of the world.
Yeah, and that's why
And
there's still a lot of poor
that's the
people.
thing. A lot of that is made up as
Shashir,
well.
I'm part Cherokee.
We didn't.
My great grandmother was
Mhm.
a Cherokee Indian. I don't look like an Indian, but
No, you don't. But how many Cherokee are left?
Well, but that's the thing. I think
that was not my point.
I think David is bringing out a good point. Is that this thing of being like a white person or a black person at this point, or a native person. I mean, a lot of people are mixed to some extent. Like we're even mixed with Neanderthals. Like they're finding out that we're part Neanderthal. Like what you're saying before, like I can't even tell you, like I know like I'm of European ancestry, but I don't know what else I have in there. I probably have some Neanderthal,
Yeah, you might, yeah. Comes from Portugal, you very well might, yeah.
And well, probably. And I know I have some Spanish ancestry as well, Italian, but I mean, like, and everybody that came to the United States, like 3-4 generations ago, probably has a bunch of ethnicities mixed in, at least European ethnicities, because you don't have a lot of pure Irish or pure Italian anymore, right? So and what's pure Italian? Like you go to Sicily and you have like people that look black, almost, people that look Arab, people who look like Vikings, because probably 1,000 years ago, there were some Viking people doing stuff to their ancestors,
Well, the Vikings did a lot of stuff. They got around.
all over Europe. So I probably have a little bit of Viking in me, and maybe you as well. I don't know. Who knows?
Well, I'm 1/8 Mongolian, and the Mongols got around quite a bit.
There you go. Like the Mongols have been everywhere. So really, we're making
1/8 Mongolian.
A lot of it.
That means that I am more like you than I am like Craig. Unless you're part Indian too, Craig.
No, I'm 100% of Slovenian descent. So, in fact, my parents were actually distant cousins. So there you go. That explains a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yep. No, me and Zizek. Yep.
Family tree didn't form.
But even if we're marrying our own cousins, which is a very Portuguese custom,
I had a
very Portuguese custom. I mean, there's still some Neanderthal in there. There's still a whole bunch of stuff that we
don't forget the Denisovans. Yeah, come on now.
Right, but again, tribalism, yes, the surface view is simple, but again, there's also culture. I mean, there's a lot of.
Look at like people like in the United States, like Tiger Woods, right? Tiger Woods, the first black golfer. The guy's like
Asian.
He's like an eighth like black at most, you know. I mean, Obama is like 50% black, if that, you know. I mean, it's I really need to get past these categories because they're really made up at this point.
Well,
You know, to a large extent.
I have a problem with identity politics of any kind. You know, the black vote, the white vote, the rural vote, the urban vote. You know,
I had a
none of those groups are homogenous.
Like now, Kamala Harris, nobody knows what she is, so she's black, you know. But now she's like, apparently now she's like Asian American. I mean,
but she is, yeah. Her mother's
a
Indian.
bunch of things. A lot of people are a bunch of things, you know. Like people would live much happier existences if they just acknowledge the truth, which is we are at this point. Like how many millions of generations are we into this thing, you know? Like there's a whole bunch of mixed people in all kinds. Like white people are so mixed at this point. Like you know, there's Gaelic people all over Europe. There's Germanic, like the Germans, they went all over Europe, like the Germanic tribes. There was a lot, let's face it, there's a lot of rape. Nobody's really pure. I mean, that's just not something that exists anymore.
Right. But again, tribalism is much more, yeah, ethnicity is a big tribal part, but there are also, there's class, there's other factors. I mean, humans, one thing humans do is clump together, and when we clump together, we form tribes. And that's this tribal thinking is, it's hard to kind of think of humanity as a whole. I mean, I think as far as the human mind can, out of people, you know, might only be like 100 people. It's hard to think of 1 million people or 1,000 people, really. I mean, that's why we construct, you know, certain tribal constructs. I mean, it could be as simple as, well, hey, I'm a Viking fan. That guy's a Viking fan. So this is our tribe. Or I'm a Democrat. He's a Democrat. I'm a libertarian. He's a libertarian, whatever. That's our tribe. But tribalism was incredibly important for most of human history. We wouldn't have survived beyond, you know, our pre-hominid state unless we had tribalism.
I know, but at this point, it's not really serving much of a purpose, right? This Democrat and Republican tribes, for example, I mean, who is this like serving, right? I mean, is it helping anybody that you have to be a Democrat or you have to be a Republican? And if you say, like, it gets to the point that if you, like me, for example, like if I say something that is not Democrat, I'm a Republican, I'm a Trump supporter, just because I say something that doesn't sound Democrat. And then the other way around, right? Like, oh, you're like a dirty liberal, you know?
No, it's an easy,
and you say something that maybe that makes sense. I don't know. You know?
No, it's an easy way of organizing.
Both sides are kind of crazy at this point. If you like, the more tribal you go, the more crazy you get.
The extremists are.
Yeah.
Right, but the problem is why I say is that why humans can't, because we're social creatures. We deal with each other all the time. We basically have to survive. That said, tribal labels basically allow us to make quick assessments of another human. If let's just say we're at a bar. Okay, we meet somebody. We don't know anything about them. We can make certain judgments about how he or her looks. But if they say, well, I'm with Bernie, you're going to immediately start getting a sense of, okay, well, this person has these certain beliefs. This person is this. Right. Or if they're wearing a MAGA hat, I mean, we'll start getting a certain sense. I mean, yeah, now they might not do anything. I mean, you could ask, well, why are you wearing a MAGA hat? I don't know, because I like the color red. That said, we might not get to that point until we really, quote, get to know them. And it's hard to get to know people.
I have a red baseball cap, and I have to confess, I'm wearing it a little less often.
Oh yeah, I've got a red Houston Rockets hat, and I mean, people ask me if that's a MAGA hat.
I go around with a mask. Do I have it here? It's a pretty unpopular mask. I get a lot of shit.
Rupinder, are you a violinist?
Let me.
I'm learning.
I go around with
Yeah,
this.
you've got a
mask
Packers
and
mask.
and I get a lot of shit.
Oh, is that
Yes.
Green Bay?
Green
Yep,
Bay
he's got a
Packers.
Packers mask.
I stopped watching Green Bay when Bart Starr was still quarterback.
Okay, so David, I should have asked you about 1918. You might actually know more about it.
Some people get a little bit aggravated in Minneapolis.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of passion about Packers and Vikings, man.
But you
Right,
know,
but this
it
is
was
the
given
point
to
is
me by
that
my
we have
mother-in-law, so I feel the obligation of wearing it sometimes.
Yeah, but that's it.
Now,
Someone
now, do you
sees you.
have to consider where it is you're going before you?
Oh, I would. Yeah, I mean, I just use it, but yeah, sometimes I get some comments.
You know, as a personal policy, I never say anything about anybody that I'm not willing to say to them. I confess I might use different words, but the point and will be the same.
That's a good principle. That's a really good principle.
Right. No, that's fine. But this is, again, our tribal judgments and stuff kind of define it's basically comes down to, like, if I'm going, like, this quote, if my car breaks down somewhere, I'm going to make a judgment particularly about who am I going to ask for help. I mean, let's just say for me, if my car breaks down in rural Mississippi, if I see a guy driving by with a Confederate flag, me looking as I am I necessarily going to stop and say, hey, buddy, can you give me a hand here? Or what might I think they might do to me?
Well, you don't know though. Like, look at that board guy. Look at that board guy. You know, like, have you seen the second board movie? Like, he becomes friends with these like QAnon people, and they're like the nicest people in the world. And I mean, obviously they're, you know, misguided about things.
Yeah, that part I think was actually staged. I don't think it was
staged. I don't know. It might have been staged. It's so crazy. But if that's
that was, I'm pretty sure it was staged. They wouldn't just let him live at his house and sit there filming him. I think.
Well, he stated that they did not know that he was not what he was saying he was. I don't know if he was lying, but that's what he said.
I've seen outtakes, and outtakes kind of show a little bit different when they show him him off.
He might be lying. You know, the guy. I don't know Sacha Baron Cohen, but he said he wasn't. I mean, he said the guys had no idea that it was him.
Yeah, it's kind of a mix. I think part of it is. I mean, Sacha Baron Cohen is not. Yeah,
I don't know if he's lying or not, but he was like very clear in what he was saying. He said, "No, yeah, they didn't know who I was," and in fact, he even like told a story about him almost being caught by them.
Right? Yeah, I saw him saying that how he switched. Yeah, but I think to the extent they were in on the joke, who they might not have known exactly who he was, but I do think they kind of played it up somewhat. It's not.
Maybe.
You know, when you're
talking one of the outtakes was he almost got killed when he goes to that rally.
The Wuhan flu.
Right. That the people almost kill him, or they start turning on
him. Well, it was very dangerous because they were wearing they were using guns. They were
right. Yeah.
And I think they were they had some. They were very aggravated, and people with guns that are very aggravated, I don't know. You never know what's going to happen.
Well, right, but in the movie, he makes it seem like they just go along with what he's saying.
Yeah.
He's saying outrageous
and
stuff.
They did for a while, but
they do actually end up getting offended at him. Yeah, and they kind of realize he's just making fun of them.
Yeah, exactly.
And they cut that out of the movie. But
I don't know if you guys watched the movie we're talking about is the second Borat movie.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have watched it or not. So I'm sorry if you haven't.
Okay, well, anyway, I think I might call it myself soon. I got to eat, but I'll leave one more thought. I mean, there's obviously a lot to talk about the fall of civilizations, but if anybody gets a chance, look up the Bronze Age collapse. And that's the kind of example I look at in terms of when I say that it's not just whether America is going to lose its permit, whether there is a potential danger for saying that we as kind of human civilizations global might be in trouble. Because the Bronze Age collapse wasn't just the fall of one civilization, it was the fall of several civilizations. All happened within about like a 200-year period at the basically like about the 9th and 8th century BC. And that was
and maybe we should have angled it more in that way, because I think that in some sense that's a more interesting conversation, you know, because there are some areas in which we might there's reason to be concerned about.
You selected a very good topic, but it's possible that you underestimated the number of rabbit holes we could go down.
Oh yeah, no, there's a lot of rabbit holes. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. It's I'm
which
sorry,
I do
Frank,
myself a lot.
We went to a whole bunch of rabbit holes, but
well, this is a philosophy group. We've got
revisit the idea of this fall of civilization.
Right. But
there are some ways.
Well, I think what hurts us sometimes is when I'm in one rabbit hole and Michael's in another and Shashir's in another.
It's like World War One, you know. It's
a foxhole.
Little trench.
That's a foxhole you're talking about now.
No, I mean, if I'm trying to speak about what's in one rabbit hole and Michael's thinking in another rabbit hole and you're thinking in a third rabbit hole.
I think we might have had like 4 or 5 rabbit holes in this particular conversation.
Oh yeah.
I don't like, it was a little bit weird, but I think it was interesting.
Good.
Yeah, unfortunately I can see why Frank left. Frank has no interest in talking about finance.
Well,
not sure he's that interested in the
that was even before that. That was the finance.
We didn't talk about anything interesting until Frank left.
Yeah, unfortunately. We went into a different rabbit hole in that one as well.
Yeah. Frank didn't want to talk about stocks, but I should have just yelled Hegel.
You should have, we could have held him here. You know, if we had yelled Hegel in time, he would have stayed. But
or Hume.
Right.
Or Hume, you know.
Well, I mean, for the Bronze Age collapse, we could have kept him interested by talking about the pre-Socratic philosophers who
we'll have to revisit
after the Bronze Age collapse.
We'll have to revisit the topic because I think there's more interesting things to talk about this fall of. I think we need to talk about the fall of human civilization, the possibilities, because that's a real thing. You know, the fall of liberal democracy, the fall of this the social divisions and the climate change thing. I mean, the technology. I mean, Harari talks that, you know, Yuval, what's his name?
Yuval Harari, yeah.
Yuval Noah Harari, he talks about the fact that, well, his whole thesis really from the beginning was that we are sapiens, but we might not be sapiens for very much longer, you know, because we are turning into a different creature.
Yes, he's kind of looking at this idea we're going to become cyborgs. I mean, he's kind of one of these singularity guys.
Yeah, and he's like using like some catchy concepts and stuff, but I mean, it is true that we are changing, you know, in some ways, maybe some fundamental ways.
I saw a YouTube video today or a couple of days ago, and I can't remember who did it, but if I can find it, I'll send it to you. And it was a very persuasive video, or I'll post it on the Facebook thing. I don't do Facebook very well, but I'm trying.
It's okay. I don't think Facebook does Facebook very well. So.
But oh gosh, what did it say? It said
oh, we were thinking of that. We forgot to ask Carolyn what she wants to talk about.
First thing that comes to mind is when we were talking about competitiveness, it reminded me there was some clickbait thing I saw with funny senior quotes. One was, "It's not enough that I should succeed, others should fail."
I like that. Well, that's Kiyasu. That was what I was saying.
That's
What
pretty
about-
much a one-sentence summary of capitalism.
That will really impress the galactic civilization.
I don't know. It depends what kind of galactic civilization.
Yeah, again, they'll be coming and they'll be carrying copies of To Serve Man to give to us, and
Well,
there we are. Yeah,
Yeah,
And there's
or
the whole
they're made of meat.
it's a cookbook.
And there's the whole like Elon Musk tribe, you know, that is getting bigger and bigger. They think that we're going to become a multi-planetary species, and maybe we will.
We
you
need
know?
Ethan for that.
And that will be a whole different thing.
I'm pretty sure that idea actually predates Elon
I know.
Musk by
I know.
I think Gene
century
Roddenberry
about.
might have had something to say about it.
But now it's
Even
the,
before Gene Roddenberry.
But you're right.
Before he even predates Roddenberry.
Yeah.
Well, this one video that I watched, and I'll try to send a link to it. It put forward the premise that in the next 5 to 10 years, humanity will enter its most transformative stage ever.
It's
Now,
not
I
crazy.
don't know if that's true.
Well, it's not crazy to think about that at all.
Yeah, it
You mean
sounds like the
until the next 5 or
singularity.
10 years after that?
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But that's absolutely true. I mean, we're in a very like crucial phase because it's not just like stuff like climate change. I mean, it's technology is changing things in ways that, I mean, we've never seen this before, right? Social media, like we're achieving the stage that we're like hive mind. You know, we're like a hive mind. We coordinate in ways that were not possible before.
Well, that's like GameStop. Stock was kind of a hive mind thing.
GameStop stock was like a hive mind moment, right? Like that day or those, not a day, you know, like a week or two, like people are going to buy the same stock, you know, just because, well, there was this theory of the short squeeze and all that, but still, you know, let's all buy that same stock, you know, and everybody does the same thing at one time, you know, at the same, like, and this is not just for buying a stock. This can be for other things.
15 years ago, I carried around in my head the telephone numbers of all my close friends. Today, I know none of them. And I have, in a very real sense, I have extended my memory and my intelligence into this device.
It's like Harry Potter, you know. I don't know if you've read Harry Potter, but there's that part that Dumbledore, there's like that device that you take the wand and you take away the memory in your head and you put it in a cauldron, you know, and that's exactly what we're doing with smartphones. Like you just did, David, you know. I'm the same way, but my memory is terrible. So I probably never knew like that many numbers, but yeah, I know no numbers right now, no phone numbers.
David, you should look up the works of a Australian philosopher by the name of Andy Clark. He wrote a fairly lengthy book called, I think it's The Extended Mind, which is, and he and David Chalmers kind of came and wrote a paper on this that is about how more and more of our cognition is being offloaded into the various things, paraphernalia that we carry around with us, and how that may fundamentally change
The
how
Extended
humans
Mind.
think.
And what was the author's name?
Andy Clark. CL, like Clark Kent. Clark, or Clark Bar Clark. Andy.
Got it.
Yep.
It's in the comment section. Yeah, we went from 24 subscribers to 25 subscribers, so that's great. Whoever subscribed, thank you. Was it you, David?
No.
Might have been me.
If you continue along that path, a year from now, you'll have 52 more.
Well, there you go. It might have been one of us. It's very possible.
Right.
And that's going to bring about the collapse of Western civilization. So there we are.
Well, there's a critical mass point.
Yeah.
Hopefully the podcast will grow. So, you know,
Well,
it would be cool to have a platform where we can actually influence things. I think that would be really cool.
Well, anyway, I'm gonna go head in the pub.
Well, yeah.
Good
Well,
night.
thanks for watching. I'm gonna stop recording. And thanks for watching the podcast, guys.
Yep.
Yep. Have a good night.
And
Yep,
I think
see you guys next week.
conversation, guys.
All right.
Thank you, Sashir. And yeah, everybody, thanks for coming. Did you have fun?
Thanks.
All right.